We are taught to believe that wisdom brings company, respect, and belonging. That the wise man is honored, surrounded by others who come to drink from his well of insight. And yet, if you look closely, the opposite often happens. The wiser a person becomes, the lonelier his road seems. Here is the paradox. Clarity separates before it connects. The clearer you see, the less you fit in. The more deeply you understand, the fewer people you can easily walk beside. Think of a mountain peak at dawn. The valley below is crowded with villages, fires burning, voices rising, and markets waking to life. But up at the summit, where the air is thin and the sky sharp with stars fading into morning, only one figure stands. The wise man, like the mountain, touches the heavens precisely because he rises above the crowd. And in that height, there is beauty, yet also solitude. We often assume loneliness is proof of failure, that walking alone means we have lost the way. But what if it is the opposite? What if solitude is the very sign of alignment with truth? The bird flying south does not wait for every other bird in the forest. The river does not stop flowing just because the stones resist. The wise man walks his path not because he desires loneliness, but because truth has its own direction, often different from the roads most people travel. And so the paradox unfolds. Wisdom, the very thing that could unite us, first pulls us apart. To see life as it is, to see through the illusions of success, the games of status, the clamor of desire, is to stand slightly apart from them. The crowd may laugh, rush, compete, but the wise man notices the futility of the chase. He does not condemn, he simply does not join. But here is the central question. What happens when the wisdom that should bring peace also brings isolation? What happens when the gift of clarity feels like a burden? When the very act of seeing differently means walking differently, and walking differently means walking alone? Alan Watts once said that the meaning of life is just to be alive. Yet most of us are too busy trying to become something else to notice. The wise man who sees this truth steps aside from the stampede. But stepping aside is not without cost. The silence he keeps, the road he takes, is not filled with applause. It is filled with the sound of his own footsteps. This is where our journey begins, with a riddle of life itself. Why does wisdom, which promises light, so often lead us into shadow? Why does the man who sees most clearly end up walking the loneliest road? Picture a small-town diner on a quiet evening. A group of friends gather around a table, laughing over coffee and pie. Most of the talk is light, sports, work, gossip about who just bought a new car. But at the corner of the booth sits one man who hardly speaks. He listens, smiles politely, but inside he feels a distance. He has been reading, reflecting, noticing patterns that others overlook. He sees how much of the conversation is built on comparison, who is ahead, who is behind, who deserves envy or pity. To the others, this is normal talk, the fabric of belonging. But to him, it feels hollow, like everyone is playing roles in a theater they don't realize is a play. One evening, when someone complains bitterly about a neighbor's success, he gently says, "Maybe it's not about being ahead. Maybe it's just about living." The table grows silent. A few shuffle uncomfortably. One laughs awkwardly and changes the subject. The man returns to his pie, realizing again how truth does not always invite applause. It is a small moment, yet it carries a heavy weight. Many of us have felt it, that instant when we voice what feels deeply true, only to find blank stares in return. The joke that falls flat, the insight that no one wants to hear, the sudden recognition that we are not walking in step with the people beside us. This is how loneliness creeps in, not because the wise man abandons others, but because clarity shifts his rhythm. Like a child learning to swim who suddenly notices the current, he moves differently, and in moving differently, he moves apart. The story of the diner could be anyone's story. Maybe it was a friend who chose not to join in office gossip and found themselves quietly excluded. Maybe it was a teenager who realized they no longer cared about being cool and suddenly felt the sting of distance. Maybe it was you, sitting at a family table, realizing the conversation you longed to have was not one anyone else could carry. Wisdom, in this sense, is not dramatic. It doesn't appear with lightning bolts or holy revelations. It appears in the small moments where you notice this game everyone is playing is not worth playing. And yet, by stepping back, you find yourself alone on the road. The wise man in the diner is not angry. He does not judge. He simply sees, and because he sees, he cannot pretend not to. That is the burden and the gift. From the diner story, a simple truth unfolds. Wisdom often means seeing the invisible strings that pull at human behavior. Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. And once you stop moving by those strings, you no longer move with the crowd. This is not unique to people. It is written everywhere in nature. Consider a river. At first glance, it looks like one body of water, flowing as one. But if you look closer, each current twists and turns differently, some breaking off into eddies, others surging ahead. The strongest and clearest streams do not always stay in the middle. They carve their own path, sometimes even reshaping the landscape itself. The wise man is like that river current. He follows the direction that feels true, not the one most traveled. And this is why his road feels lonelier. It is not paved by consensus. It is carved by authenticity. Alan Watts once suggested that the menu is not the meal. In other words, the symbols, the games, the words we cling to are not the life itself. Yet most of us live by menus, titles, roles, identities, victories, failures. We forget to taste the meal. The wise man, noticing this, begins to live differently. He does not measure by the scoreboard of society. He measures by alignment with life itself. But that choice carries a cost. To live by the river's flow rather than the town's rules means being misunderstood. It means stepping away from conversations that go in circles. It means embracing silence where others cling to noise. And silence, to those who fear it, looks like loneliness. Here lies the principle. Wisdom and belonging do not always arrive together. At first, they clash. The deeper you see, the less you fit into the surface games. But over time, the very solitude that seemed like exile becomes freedom. Like a tree in the forest, the wise man grows roots unseen, drawing nourishment from deeper soil. He is not apart from life. He is more deeply woven into it than the crowd ever imagines. Think again of that man at the diner. He seemed quiet, even lonely. But beneath his silence was a peace the others could not find. They chased laughter to drown their restlessness. He found rest in simply being. That is the hidden gift of the loneliest road. Though it looks empty, it is full of life. There are always two roads before us. One is wide, crowded, filled with familiar noise. The other is narrow, quiet, and often feels deserted. The first path is the way most of us learn to walk. It is the path of constant striving, measuring life by comparison, by achievement, by how well we perform in the play of society. On this road, there is companionship, yes, but it is fragile. People gather not because they are truly together, but because they share the same illusions. Status, gossip, competition. These are the threads that bind them. Yet those threads fray quickly. Today's friend becomes tomorrow's rival. Belonging depends on conformity. Step out of line and you risk being cast aside. The second path is quieter. It is the way of the wise man. He does not reject people, but he does not chain his steps to their games. He learns to walk with silence as his companion, with nature as his mirror, with truth as his guide. This road feels lonelier because there are fewer travelers, but its solitude carries a strange richness. Here, freedom is not the absence of people, but the absence of pretense. Think of it like music. The first path is a soloist playing louder and louder, hoping to drown out silence and win applause. The second path is a symphony tuned to the deeper rhythm of life, yet often unheard by those still clapping at the surface show. Or picture ecosystems, the crowded desert, full of struggle for scarce water, versus the quiet rainforest, where abundance is hidden beneath the canopy. The crowd's road may seem vibrant, but it exhausts the soul. The wise man's road may seem lonely, but it renews it. Alan Watts once noted that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. On the crowded path, everyone is busy trying to bite their own teeth, desperate to prove who they are. On the lonelier path, the wise man lets go of the need to define. He simply lives. The contrast is clear. Path 1. Belonging through conformity, constant anxiety, fragile connection. Path 2. Solitude. At first, but deeper freedom, peace, and authenticity. And here's the one-liner to remember. Better to walk alone in truth than to march together in illusion. The choice is never easy. One feels safe but shallow. The other feels lonely but deep. Yet the wise man knows the loneliest road is not truly lonely. It is simply less traveled. And because it is less traveled, it is where life itself has space to breathe. The loneliest road is not only about solitude, it is also about stepping into the unknown. Most people fear this. We crave certainty, maps, plans, guarantees. But wisdom whispers something different. Not knowing is not a weakness, it is freedom. Alan Watts often reminded us that the eye cannot see itself, the knife cannot cut itself, the flame cannot burn itself. Life, in the same way, cannot fully grasp itself. The wise man, unlike the crowd, does not fight this. He bows to the mystery. Where others cling to answers, he rests in the question. Picture walking at night beneath a vast sky. The crowd gathers in the city square, under artificial lights, comforted by the brightness. The wise man leaves the square and steps into the open field, where the stars burn quietly above. He sees more, not less, because he is willing to walk in darkness. That is the essence of wisdom, exchanging the shallow safety of certainty for the deeper wonder of the unknown. Most of us think knowledge is control, that if we just gather enough facts, enough plans, enough strategies, we will finally be safe. But notice, the more tightly we cling, the more fragile we become. Like a man clutching sand, the harder he squeezes, the more it slips through his fingers. The wise man does not squeeze. He opens his hand and lets the sand rest there. He does not claim to own it. He marvels that it was ever there at all. This is why his road feels lonely. Not because there is no one else, but because few dare to walk without the crutch of certainty. Few dare to admit, "I don't know." Yet this phrase, far from weakness, is a doorway. It is the opening through which real discovery enters. The paradox deepens. By letting go of certainty, the wise man gains a deeper kind of confidence, not the brittle confidence of having all the answers, but the steady faith that life itself is trustworthy, even when it cannot be predicted. He walks alone, yes, but he walks with the universe as his silent companion. Think again of the man at the diner. His silence was not empty. It was filled with seeing. He didn't have to prove his insight with endless arguments. He could rest in not knowing, in simply being. That silence, that "I don't know," is the secret treasure of the loneliest road. So the mystery is not something to be solved. It is something to be entered. The wise man does not demand that life hand him a map. He allows life to be the map. And in that surrender, the lonely road becomes the most intimate path of all. We began with a paradox. That wisdom, which should connect us, often makes us feel separate. The wise man sees more clearly, and because he sees more clearly, he walks differently. And because he walks differently, he often walks alone. But now, after traveling this idea together, perhaps the paradox looks less like a curse and more like a gift. Loneliness, as it turns out, is not emptiness. It is space, space to notice, space to breathe, space for life to reveal itself in ways hidden by the noise of the crowd. Alan Watts once observed that change, impermanence, and uncertainty are not enemies, but companions. The crowd resists this truth, clinging to the illusion of control, of belonging, of permanence. The wise man surrenders to it. He sees that every ending is also a beginning. Every silence is also a song. Every lonely step is also a dance with the mystery of existence. Think again of the mountain peak at dawn. At first it seemed barren and desolate compared to the bustling valley below. But now you see the other side. From that height, the view is vast. The valley is still there, the fires still burn, the voices still rise, but from above, you see the horizon stretch endlessly. You see the sun breaking over the earth. You see the whole, not just the part. That is the reward of the loneliest road. So why does the wise man walk it? Not because he enjoys being apart, not because he despises the crowd, but because the road of truth leads him there. And in walking it, he discovers something the crowd has missed, that solitude is not isolation. It is communion with life itself. And here lies the invitation for you. You will face moments when your truth does not match the crowd's laughter, when your insight feels like silence in a noisy room, when your steps take you down a path where no one else seems to follow. In those moments, remember, the lonely road is not a punishment. It is a path of depth, of freedom, of becoming fully alive. Better to walk alone with integrity than to march together in illusion. Better to sit in silence with truth than to fill the air with empty noise. Better to trust the mystery than to cling to false certainty. So the next time you feel the sting of walking alone, lift your eyes. The wise man is not abandoned. He is simply walking where few have the courage to go. The loneliest road is, in truth, the road that leads us home.